Morning all, welcome to the Development Management meeting. Before we get started with today's agenda proper, we'll go around and introduce ourselves, starting with Councillor Moody, please.
Councillor Jeff Moody, Tavistock North.
Councillor Patrick Kimber, Hatherley Ward.
Councillor Alistair Cunningham, Buckland Monacorum Ward.
Caroline Mott, Bridgestow Ward.
Councillor Terry Southcott, Bridgestow Ward.
Councillor Sam Wakeham, Hatherley Ward.
Bryony Hanlon, Senior Planning Officer at West Devon. Jacqueline Houselander, Head of Development Management for West Devon.
David Fairbairn, Head of Legal Services and Monitoring Officer for the Council.
Richard Edel, Chair of the Committee and Member for Buckland Monacorum.
Steve Guthrie, Councillor for Drew Stainton Ward.
Catherine Hall, West Devon Borough Council Democratic Services Officer.
Okay, thanks very much. And we have one apology for absence.
We have two apologies. We've got apologies from Councillor Jury and Councillor Leach, and Councillor Kimber is substituting for Councillor Jury. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. Item 3 is declaration of interest. In accordance with the Code of Conduct, members are invited to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests and non-registrable interests, including the nature and extent of such interests they may have in any items to be considered at this meeting. Has anyone got a declaration of interest? Councillor Moody.
Being a town councillor on the Tavistock Town Council, referring to the tree application.
Noted.
So I will
Any others?
not participate in the voting. Is that okay?
I think, Chairman, that would probably be the sensible thing.
Thank you. Item 4, items requiring urgent attention. None have been brought to me. Item 5, confirmation of minutes. You've got the minutes. Are you happy for me to approve those minutes? Yes, thank you. Sorry, did you have a comment to make on the minutes?
Sorry.
Oh, right, thank you. Okay, we now have a statement from our legal advisor, the monitoring officer.
Thank you, Chairman. For those members of the public who are listening or in the room and perhaps less familiar with the way in which the committee will make its decisions, the committee is required to have regard to the development plan. Development plan in this case is the joint local plan and any made neighbourhood plan, and decisions are to be made in accordance with the development plan unless the material considerations suggest otherwise. Material considerations being those concerning the use and development of land in the public interest. Anything else is irrelevant. Decision in terms of looking at the development plan, because obviously decision policies can pull in different directions. It will be a matter of planning judgment as to the weight to be given to the particular policies and the degree to which there is compliance or non-compliance. I think that's probably all I need to say at this stage, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Okay, that moves us on to item 7, which are the planning applications themselves. And the first one is 075025 VAR, land at Lifton. We have the planning officer's report, please.
Okay, so this is a variation application where the applicant wishes to change the dwelling that had previously been consented. So just to give you some idea of context, some of you have obviously visited the site before. So you can just see in the centre of the screen the red track down and then the yellow rectangle, and that's the proposed site of the dwelling. And then we've got the aerial view. I've just highlighted it with a rectangle so you can kind of get your bearings. This just shows you the site location plan, block plan and site layout. There are no changes to the actual siting of the building or the way that it's accessed. It's purely the size of the building. So this is the proposed floor plan and elevations drawing. What I've done is I've blown those up on subsequent slides. So you can just see here, so on the left-hand side of the screen, you've got the residential area. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, you've got the farm office element, and obviously there's an interconnecting door with its own access to the outside. This is the proposed first floor plan, just so that you can see inside. And this is residential accommodation only, so there are 4 bedrooms and a bathroom. And this is just to give you an idea of context. As I said, that the site hasn't changed, but it is helpful to refresh your memory. So here we are looking north to the Strawberry Fields Farm Shop, and then directly south, so those of you on the site visit for the previous application will remember that we walked through the field. And this is the actual site itself, so we're looking southwest here. And then northwest, and then this is the view south of the site, just so that you can see the open countryside. So the site benefits from an extant consent for a farm workers dwelling. They've got 170 square metres of residential space and 50 of farm-related. That's extant, and the applicant has now proposed additional residential and farm-related floor space. But they haven't given us evidence of increased or alternative agricultural need to justify that additional space. And as the LPA, we think that that larger dwelling doesn't meet the test of essential agricultural need that would remain affordable in perpetuity for the farm worker. And so we consider it contrary to policies listed out there, and we have recommended refusal.
Thank you very much. Questions for the planning officer, please, from the committee? Councillor Moody.
Just a question. I understand that the plan is for 30 ewes and 10 breeding cattle. Is that correct on that site?
That's not something that we've had submitted
Oh, right.
to us.
I'm sorry. I may be incorrect. Sorry.
Thank you. Is this a tied building? It'll be tied.
It will, yes, tied.
So there's lots of constrictions with that.
There's just the one constriction, so it will be tied to be that farm worker dwelling.
I have just one question. The extant approval for the building prior to this application, was that comfortably within the limits for agricultural use, or was that bordering on the large side in the first place?
So it was at the top end of what we would normally consent, but you know the top end is still permissible, and on that basis we had approved it.
Thank you. Any other questions from members of the committee? Councillor Kimber.
So I think the application talks about farm manager rather than farm worker. Are they effectively the same thing?
So our policy doesn't make a distinction. It has to be agriculturally related need.
Any other questions? Okay, we have 3 registered speakers today, and the first is Mr. Peter Wonnacott. Would you like to come up to the... Okay, welcome to the committee, and you have 3 minutes to address the committee. Start when you're ready. Just press the button.
My comments were based on the officer's report that was that I downloaded, so I don't know whether it's the correct one or not. Yeah, it is, okay. Right, thank you, Chairman. The proposal is to slightly increase the size of the residential element of the approved dwelling together with the business office element. The residential increases by 46 square metres over 2 floors and the office element by 10 square metres. The overall residential floor area changes from 170 to 216 square metres and from 50 to 60 on business office space. The changes in practice would make no significant difference to the appearance of the dwelling. There have been no relevant policy changes relating to this type of dwelling since the approval was issued in February of this year. The reason given for a recommended refusal appears to be that no evidence to justify the increase in size has been submitted, and that as such a development exceeds that which justifies an essential agricultural need in this location and is therefore unlikely to remain affordable for an agricultural farm worker in perpetuity. The officer offers no evidence of values to back up this assertion. Following consideration, I'd like to make the following points to you. 1, the occupation of the dwelling is not restricted solely to an agricultural worker. It includes farm manager, a manager of Strawberry Fields farm shop business and a manager of Woollerden Cottages. And that's in the occupation condition restriction. The size of the dwelling approved was not made on any policy guidance issued by West Devon. West Devon has no policy guidance on size for this type of dwelling, nor that this type of dwelling has to remain affordable for rural workers in perpetuity. I've taken informal advice from a local estate agent on the question of value, which is that the increase in size is unlikely to make any significant difference to the overall value of the dwelling, nor therefore any difference as to affordability, whether now or in perpetuity. My view is that the proposed dwelling would remain affordable to the type of rural worker that is occupationally restricted to, and there's no evidence been provided by the case officer to the contrary. In the report, paragraph 3.4, the officer references the nationally described space standard for a 4-bedroom dwelling, but fails to mention that these standards are minimum standards, not maximum ones, and also relates them to agricultural need, not the wider need previously indicated. It is understood that an appeal was recently allowed in August 24 for a similar type of dwelling at Beworthy, where many arguments similar to those raised here, similar to those raised by the case officer here, and they were dismissed by the appeal inspector. It is particularly of note that the inspector in that appeal considered that a dwelling with a floor area of 246 square metres was not excessively large. The question is, in the context of the above and the appeal decision, are the indicated grounds for refusal of this application justified and reasonable? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for keeping to the time limit too.
Sorry?
Thank you for keeping to the time limit too. Have we got questions from the committee for Mr. Wonnacott?
Morning.
Can you give us an indication of if this refusal is passed and therefore you don't get the increased space, what effect will it have on your business in terms of its viability and or better improvement and potential increase in employment?
It won't affect any increase in employment, but it will affect the applicant's ability to occupy the dwelling in a manner that would normally befit someone who's got a large business of the size that he has. And also they do have people come down and stay with them that are related to business, and they don't have a spare bedroom for that, which was the primary driver of this.
Any other questions for Mr. Wonnacott? No? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Our next registered speaker is Councillor Measy from Lifton Parish Council. Good morning to you. Good morning. You've got 3 minutes to address the committee, and when you're ready to go, just press the right-hand button and off you go.
Okay, so okay. Lifton Parish Council supported the previous applications, and while noting the application would slightly increase the size due to the addition of a 4th bedroom and increased size of the farm manager's office, we've decided to support unanimously the application. Wherever possible, as a parish council, we try to support local business as we value their contribution to the local economy. We also noted there were no local objections to the application. Your end of the lesson.
My goodness, that's one of the shortest ones I think we've ever had. Any questions for Councillor Measy? You've got away scot-free. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry, there is one. Councillor Reid.
The view of your community in regards to this particular business venture, what's the general feeling about the whole concept and looking after the people who are running it?
We would support it. One of the things that were raised was that it's not seen from the road by people who live in the village or in the area, but in general, in terms of supporting a local business, we would be all in favour of doing whatever we can to support them.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No, thank you very much.
Get up now.
Our final registered speaker is Councillor Edmonds. No stranger to this committee. Councillor Edmonds, as I'm sure you're aware, you have 5 minutes.
I am this
only.
Time. I am this time.
When you're ready, off you go.
Thank you, Chair. This application does not propose new residential development in the open countryside. The principle of development has already been fully established through the grant of outline planning consent in 2022, followed by reserved matters approval in February 2025. The current proposal simply seeks a modest and practical variation to the approved scheme. It introduces one additional bedroom to allow for greater flexibility in the use of the home, including temporary family support or guests. A small increase in the agricultural office space and a minor adjustment to the external lighting plan. As we've heard, the overall increase in residential floor area amounts to 46 square metres, 23 per floor, taking the residential space from 170 to 216 square metres, and the office space from 50 to 60 square metres. The garage space remains unchanged. This is a modest increase in the context of the approved dwelling. The refusal recommendation rests on 2 points. One, that the proposed size of the dwelling and farm office exceeds the essential agricultural need. Two, that the dwelling is unlikely to remain affordable for an agricultural worker in perpetuity. Both of these concerns are addressed and, I would argue, challenged by a recent and directly comparable planning inspectorate appeal decision. This appeal decision relates to a rural workers' dwelling at Borough, an isolated countryside location within West Devon. The planning application for the rural workers' dwelling was refused by the council for almost identical reasons as the Woollerton application, the application in front of you. The reason given, the quantum of residential floor space proposed has not been supported by an essential agricultural need, is unlikely to remain affordable for an agricultural worker in perpetuity. However, the planning inspector allowed the appeal and granted permission, and the inspector's key findings included: no floor space cap exists in the joint local plan, including TTV 26 or the supplementary planning document. The inspector gave limited weight to older appeal decisions from Dorset, which are now over a decade old. The same cases cited in the officer's report for Woollerton. On affordability, the inspector found there was no policy requirement for affordability to be assessed by financial metrics. No rural wage data, housing market analysis, or viability evidence had been presented to support the affordability concerns. A standard agricultural occupancy condition was sufficient to safeguard future affordability. These findings directly address and challenge the very same issues raised in the Woollerton refusal. The fallback position remains an extant permission for a 4-bed agricultural dwelling and associated office. The current application simply seeks to amend that scheme with minor and justified modifications. The addition of floor space does not undermine the agricultural purpose of the dwelling, nor has it been demonstrated to harm long-term affordability. The B with the appeal demonstrates that the council's concerns were not upheld at appeal, which I consider to be a material consideration. Members, this is a small amendment to an already approved scheme. The scale remains in line with other rural worker dwellings recently approved through appeal. The refusal reasons have not been substantiated by up-to-date policy or evidence, and they've already been overturned by a planning inspector in a directly related or relevant case. In conclusion, members, I consider that the recommendation for the refusal of this application is no longer valid. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Edmonds. Any questions for Councillor Edmonds? Guthrie.
Thanks, Councillor Edmonds. Just for my own clarity, the original outline grant for the dwelling, was that specifically stated as a 4-bedroom dwelling?
Thank you. At outline, obviously, as you know, there's, I don't think, a requirement to state the number, so I can't remember whether it was indicated, but certainly it was in the, when the reserve matters came forward. But I'll be honest, I can't remember whether it was referred to in the...
I think we'll ask the officer, who probably will be able to answer that question.
Thanks, Councillor.
We'll just check for you.
While we're doing that, I have one question. You said in your address that there was evidence in support of this increase, justification. Yet in the officer's report says there was no evidence, no submitted evidence for justifying the increase. Can you recall what the evidence is?
I'm not sure I stated that there was evidence. I think that was perhaps a personal opinion, that the reason was justified in terms of giving that extra flexibility with regard to the property, family and guest use. But I've not seen any evidence. I think
the point I'm making is, was there any specific agricultural justification for the increase?
I've not seen any. It's part of the overall agricultural need. I've not seen any additional evidence in respect of this application.
Thank you.
So the outline consent, because it was an outline, details of the scale and layout and appearance were all reserved matters, so there wasn't a limit on the size at that time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, any other questions?
Yes, I have. The potential change to this building, will it have any influence on the provision of accommodation for disabled people?
I'm afraid I don't know whether that is the case. I haven't got that detail in front of me. It would be in the plan, I'm sure. The drawings that have been submitted, I would have thought that would have been included in that.
Councillor Moody.
Just as a point of clarity, in the consultation paragraph for Lifton Parish, it is in there that it says the application was originally for 3 bedrooms. That's probably where it's come from, the parish statement, not the planning officer.
Thank you for that. Any other questions for Councillor Evans? Yes, Councillor Moody? No. Okay.
Question to the officer, based on what has been said. What comments do you have regarding the acceptability of the argument of the previous planning appeal decision? Are you in a position to comment on that at this point?
So, as you will all be aware, applications are considered on their merits, each one.
whilst there was an appeal and a refusal and an appeal, and the appeal was allowed. That relates to that particular site. This is a different situation, a different site, and we would ask members to consider it on that basis.
I think that's helpful to members.
Any other questions for Councillor Edmonds? No, thank you very much. Okay, members, we've had questions from applicant and supporters. We've had questions for the planning officer. We're now in debate before we go to moving the motion and voting. So any matters of debate, do that. Councillor Moody.
Thank you very much. No, I looked at the application. I take the arguments of the applicant. The argument about the previous appeal, we don't know the details of that, so we can't use those in making this judgment. And in the situation where no documentary information has been given to explain the reason for the increase, then I will be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Any other questions? Any other matters of debate? Okay,
Councillor, Chairman, I seem to be ignored. Shall I be a bit more positive? Thank you. Can I ask our monitoring officer, if the applicant's refusal, they decide to go to a further appeal, what effect would that have on our council if it's related to this other piece of case law?
Well, as Mrs. Houselander has said, I mean, each case is considered on its own merits, and I don't know the circumstances of the earlier appeal. I can't really comment on that, ultimately it will be a matter of planning judgment by the inspector as to whether or not he agrees with the case that we've put forward. But at the moment, the officer recommendation is one of refusal, based on the absence of additional information being put forward to support the additional increase that's now being sought.
Councillor Wakeham.
I can't see that the plans are excessive in any way. I think it's perfectly acceptable to have a 4-bedroomed home for a farm manager with a family, or supposing it is, but 4 bedrooms is not excessive. And as for foretelling whether it can be affordable to a farm worker in the future, how do we know? How can we foretell that? I don't think we should presuppose that at all, and I don't think that should be part of deciding whether this application goes through. So I'm going to support the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments before we... Okay, I move the recommendation, the officer's recommendation for refusal. Can I have a seconder for that, please? Thank you. We now go to the vote. Just to remind you before we vote what we're voting on. We're voting on the officer's recommendation for refusal. So those in favour of the officer's recommendation for refusal, please show. Those against? The application is refused. Thank you. Right, we now move on to the second application, which is TPO 1114, New Cemetery, Plymouth Road, Tavistock. And we have the tree officer here, ready to take his seat. And when you're ready, we'll hear your report.
Good morning, members. So I was here before a month ago, I believe, to seek the committee's view on my wish to refuse in part a tree work application. So just for total clarity, let me come on. You don't want to be on my summary page yet. What I am here today for is to seek the committee's view on whether they would grant me permission to confirm the TPO. So the TPO, T1 in the middle of the picture here, they are provisional for 6 months from the date of serving, after which time, after the end of the 6th month, they fall away, so the protection would be gone. The neighbour at 121 Plymouth Road issued an objection to the confirmation of the TPO, so I, of course, then reached out to ward members to see if delegation could be given, and as before, because of the fact they sit on the town council who own the land of where the tree is there, they quite rightly declared their interest, and Jacqueline called it in back to committee. So I'm just going through the pictures, which I'm sure you will all remember from my previous presentation. So the reason the item is before committee, both ward members for Tavistock South West are unable to consider my delegation request, and it's called to committee. Conflict of interest declared, and I am here now just to go through it. The points of objection are the same as the objection to, or the reasons for me when they wanted to fell the tree. But for completeness, I have them here again. The objector's concerns again that the trees are rogue and there was planted due to difficult relationships with the grounds manager. Well, we haven't evidenced that, and of course I can only deal with what's in front of me now and see the tree as it is. It's a well-formed specimen of the species of increasing public benefit. They went on to talk about concerns about insurance. Well, I've been doing this job 28 years now as a tree officer, and I've never had it confirmed to me that a property becomes uninsurable due to the presence of trees. We will listen, of course, and we would never accept an unreasonable relationship that would damage a property. And trees can be removed on that basis, but that's certainly not what I'm seeing here. And as far as I know, the property continues to be insured. Matters of leap fall, sap fall, and risk are still concerns to the objector. And I guess I really have to be careful, and I do not want to sound flippant, but it is an element of living amongst nature. Trees will shed leaves. It's a heavily treed area that we all benefit from, and this tree is an intrinsic element of it. And with that comes, unfortunately, some issues. There is case law to support that through the courts, that trees shouldn't be felled just because of the fall of debris if we needed to go further on that. Concerns about its size, well, yeah, if it did grow up to 40 metres, I would be very happy, but clearly that would be national champion, and I haven't seen one in the area. And I believe even at 40 metres, that would be an unreasonable relationship. So of course we would approve pruning works. The species is very tolerant of pruning, and it would respond well to size limiting works down the line if that was felt necessary, over and above the minor works you granted consent for before. Concerns, I believe, that policies hadn't been adhered to. We have followed it. I've been very, very careful to follow it as close as I can, hence my second visit to committee in 2 months. But so I'm sure and hopeful that we are on the right side of policy. And the right to light was concerned, which I had mentioned before. There's never been a proven case of a tree taking someone's right to light or affecting the right to light because of the slow growing nature of a tree. They gradually grow up and decrease light. The same applies to views. Where you have case law on your side that would allow works, it would be if someone, for example, craned in a porter cabin and it blocked someone, or built a building, then there is case law to support. But the slow growing nature of trees, there's no case law to support the removal of trees because of an erosion of light. So the key issues: seasonal debris fall. my view is that is, and of the courts, so that's just a consequence of living amongst nature, in which we all enjoy. If we didn't protect the tree, for example, the TPO is allowed to fall away, then it would only be protected by the conservation area again, and we would have no control of standard of works. Or if there was a change of view from the town council, for example, they could in fact say, yeah, we would allow the tree to be felled. So we need to make a separation. I am regarding this through the eyes of the planning authority, my duty to protect the amenities of the wider the public. The town council might take a different view down the line, so this is where I applied the amenity appraisal and it scored the correct threshold using our adopted system, hence the TPO and my wish to confirm it. If the tree was lost, it would be harmful. It would be harmful to the present amenities contributed, but also I always think forward to what the tree could be, and the harm would be amplified by its removal because it will just grow to a reasonable amount. We won't allow it to be unreasonably affecting the enjoyment of the property, but it's the future benefits we also have to protect. So my view that the continued presence of T1, if you allow me to confirm the TPO, it will continue its public benefits without great harm. It'll continue its contribution to the tranquility of the cemetery. Wildlife benefits will grow, and of course the important other factors of climate change mitigation, carbon sequestration, improvement of air quality, stormwater, these sort of things are, it's only a small tree, but every one matters as far as I'm concerned, and if it's not causing a poor relationship, I will have to have a view for the authority. Again, if it gets too big, become proven, we would obviously be open to an application for size limiting works. Again, the species is tolerant to that. So my recommendation that it is confirmed, and this is where I hold my hand up, I made an editing error when I created the TPO. I called it New Road Cemetery. I don't know why my mind quite liked the name, but it's New Cemetery, Plymouth Road. So I will be seeking consent as well, just to do a minor amendment to the typo, but to confirm the TPO. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for the tree officer? I have one. It's a bit of a complicated question, this, but when we looked at this a month ago, we endorsed the pruning of the tree on the side of the resident. Does that endorsement carry forward to the TPO? I mean, once and if a TPO is placed on this tree, does the ability to prune it, as we agreed at the committee a month ago, pertain, or does someone have to put in an application to prune it?
No. So the decision we made was based on the status of the tree being protected by the TPO. So the decision is against the TPO, and it's extant for 2 years. So, and I believe the town council have undertaken some of the works approved already. So yes, no further application is required. Is that a simple answer?
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions? Okay, we have one registered speaker, Mr. Graham Coker. Welcome again, Mr. Coker. You've been here before, so you know the routine. You've got 3 minutes to talk to the committee. Off you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity. I haven't brought in this time the lengthy reasons why the tree should be removed. The tree officer's just gone through all of those. But just to reiterate, the tree is very big now, and it's going to grow to twice its size in the future. And at the last meeting, I did invite West Devon Borough Council to site to see this problem that it's creating for us. The tree has blocked the sky out from my property, and that is blocking the light. And therefore, I would like again to invite the council to my home address to view this tree in 3-dimensional and real time, such as the impact and misery it's causing our property. The other thing that I don't understand, and forgive me, I don't understand council procedure, but today I understand is to make the tree a TPO. But I have submitted an appeal to the Department for the Environment, and that was issued on the 31st of May. And West Devon Borough Council have a copy of that appeal. I don't understand why I'm here today trying to defend the tree from being a TPO when there's an appeal into the DOE. So I would like a little bit of clarity on that, if I'm mistaken, whether I'll stand corrected. But I would very much appreciate a council visit. This tree is supported by the opinion of one person, and one person only. There is no support from the public. The consultation periods had no support whatsoever. So I feel I've got a very strong case to have this tree reviewed and removed. That's my presentation. Thank you.
I personally have visited this tree, so I'm well aware of where it is and how it is. I think others may have spotted it from the road as well, but I've actually stood underneath it. So
well, the view you have there in the picture at the moment, it's much more aggressive now. It's dominating all that sky space that you can see spare. It's a complete misery.
But just to make you aware, I have actually visited this tree.
I understand you, sir. Sorry, but did you go into my property and view it from my side?
No, I didn't, but I viewed it from the road and viewed it from underneath the tree.
That's what I would like council to do.
Right. Other questions from Mr. Coker? Councillor Reid?
For clarity, the picture showing now, is that your home, sir?
It is.
And where's the trio relative to it? Is that the one on the left, just above the blue car?
That's the one there, yeah.
So it's not actually, it's facing a blank wall, is that correct? I.e. the end of the building?
Yeah, it's in that direction it is, yeah.
Right. And one last thing, it mentioned in the presentation about poor relations. I presume it wasn't somebody who was just on their uppers. Or does this mean something to do with dispute with neighbours? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm not sure that that's absolutely correct. I've had the property for 25 years, and we applied for and had removed a row of fir trees that were actually right on the boundary edge of our property and the cemetery. And that, according to the cemetery manager at the time, was the wrong trees in the wrong place. So we had those removed, but that seems to be held against me now because I've been accused of thuggery or some sort. And I'm not. I feel that I do have a good relationship with the local council. But obviously when you ask for things to be done, it gets a little bit contentious. But as far as I'm concerned, we're on an even playing field, so.
I think we're straying a bit from planning.
Report, so I presume it's sensible to ask that question.
I think it's, there is a history, obviously, of some description here, which is why it was mentioned in the report, but it's not relevant to the decision that you're making today. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Coker? No, thank you very much.
Okay.
Sorry?
Clarify his question.
Please do.
Yeah. So let's just frame it. You wanted to know why you were here, and you'd been here before in terms and against the concurrently running appeal. So there's two arms to this. So we've got your tree work application, which we dealt with last time. That we got agreement to allow the lesser works. So that's put to the side, and then you've obviously dissatisfied with that decision and took that to Bristol, which that's great. I welcome the balance in from central government. That's no problem. The reason we're here today is the tree preservation order only lasts for 6 months, and the clock ticks quickly in my world. So it's a completely different arm from the appeal. So that's where it needs to be running its course. And this is a local matter where the committee may or may not allow agreement to confirm the TPO. Bristol doesn't have that power.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Finally, any other questions for Mr. Coker? Thank you very much. Okay, we now are in debate, if there is any debate. So we move, sorry, Councillor Wakeham.
Thank you. You just said that the TPO only lasts for 6 months. What happens after that?
It just falls away, and then the tree will revert to, in this instance, being protected by the conservation area only.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're talking about, the provisional TPO. If the provisional TPO lasts for 6 months, unless it's confirmed, if it's confirmed, then it becomes permanent, and that is what we're here to do today.
Okay, so the officer's recommendation is to confirm a TPO on the tree in this application, TPO 1114. Can I have a seconder for that? Yes, and with the modified address as outlined by the TPO. Yeah. Seconder? Second, thank you. Yep. Those in favour of confirming the TPO, please show. Those against? The TPO is confirmed. Thank you. We now move to the final application today, which is 086625 HHO Waybarn Broadwood Kelly, for which the planning officer taking his seat. And when you're ready, off you go.
Right, sorry about that, a little bit of technical issues there. Good morning, everyone. So this is Waybarn. This is a householder application for an extension to a converted barn. I'll just take you briefly through where the application is. So as you can see, we're in the open countryside. We're approximately a mile north of Broadwood Kelly, approximately a mile and a half to the west of Winkley. A little look at the site from above, and a zoomed in look here with the barn clearly marked by the big arrow. So as you can see, we're in a very rural location in amongst green fields. So this is Waybarn. It's a small converted barn in a countryside location. The built form of the barn is largely intact following conversion. The changes made were the removal of a corrugated metal roof to replace with natural slate and roof lights when it was converted. Glazing was installed to the south elevation, which is the picture off to the side there. Some additional openings were added to the north and east elevations, and it's worth noting that PD rights were removed during conversion, and that was to protect the character of the barn. So a brief bit of planning history, a number of applications on the site, culminating in a prior approval of the conversion of the barn to a one-bedroom dwelling. This was followed by a full planning application which sought to convert the barn into a two-bedroom dwelling with a second bedroom on the mezzanine level, which was approved. Subsequent to that, we had a pre-application discussion with the applicant late last year, which I was the officer for. Pre-application discussion centred around two indicative designs, so they're the two pictures to the side there, so mock-ups of the designs we were shown. Limited further information was provided. Officers provided no support for the extensions. The reason for that is extensions are not generally considered allowable on converted barns. That's one of the reasons why the PD rights were removed. And officers referred the agent to the barn guide, which states quite clearly that there's a presumption against extensions when converting historic barns. During the pre-application process, after having initial discussions and suggesting that there would be no officer support, a further very indicative sketch design was submitted, which is the one you see there in the centre. Again, officers said, unfortunately, there was no officer support for that design either, again, citing the barn guide and the presumption against extensions on converted barns. Subsequent to that, this year, we received a planning application. This largely follows the indicative design that was received during the pre-application, towards the end of the pre-application process. Here's a floor plan of it. The dark grey is the existing barn, and the lighter colour there is the extension that's proposed. Just for reference, I haven't got a north bar on that, but the bottom of that, the bottom elevation, the lowest there is east, to give you an idea, what we consider to be the principal elevation. So taking you through some plans, these are the proposed plans, but they also show an indication of where the existing barn is. So we have the north elevation, which now includes a new entranceway, where previously there was just a window. That has been projected forward, so we have a projection to the north elevation coming forward, an extension which mimics the existing barn in terms of its pitch. It is slightly lower at the ridge, and it is slightly recessed from the front and slightly lower at the eaves. The second picture, the south elevation, shows you how the other side of the building would be affected, and you can see the wraparound extension to the rear of the property. This is the east elevation, what we consider to be the primary elevation. So you can see the extension off there to the right-hand side. Again, you can see that the ridge is slightly lower than the existing. And at the rear, we have this wraparound extension, so you can see that the main body of the extension projecting to the north there mimics the original style of the barn, although lower. And then we have this wraparound single-storey extension to the side, which has a sort of lean-to characteristic to it. I'll take you through a summary of the considerations officers have had. So Way Barn has been considered to be a non-designated heritage asset by officers. This is because the conversion largely maintained the existing built form of the barn with few additional openings and no extensions. It's important to note that extensions were not a feature of the barn prior to conversion. Permission to convert conditioned the removal of permitted development rights, specifically to preserve the character of the structure. It's considered by officers that the barn continues to display features that are key to its understanding and heritage value. These include buttresses to the north elevation, a threshing door to the east elevation, the modest openings, an uncluttered exterior, and an interior characterised by a large open plan space. In considering the proposal, officers take issue with the size of the extension. Extensions in the open countryside, we generally, under TTV 29.5, like to see them at below 50% of the existing floor space. This is considered to be larger than that. Where applications for extensions are larger than 50%, we like to see a significant uplift in design. It's the officer's opinion that this doesn't achieve that. The reasons are the proposed extension is positioned to the north elevation, which is the most prominent on entering the site, and therefore it rivals the primacy of the original barn. The extension introduces a new main entrance, which exacerbates that issue. It overly domesticates the structure, and it compromises the heritage value of the NDHA. Against that, we have a benefit, which is considered to be entirely private, and there's no public benefit to outweigh the presumption against an application that doesn't meet the development plan and causes harm to an NDHA. It's really important to note that any planning permission would go with the barn and not with the applicants, and officers are very aware of the applicant's personal circumstances and do have sympathy with that, but it is important to make it clear that a planning application goes with the barn and not with the applicants. That concludes.
Thank you very much. Questions for the planning officer. Councillor Moody.
For those members, particularly new one sitting next to me, NDHA, would you like to explain what that means to members and the significance of it?
Okay, so NDHA, sorry for using an acronym, is a non-designated heritage asset. So it's an asset that isn't listed, so it's not formally designated, but it does play an important role in the understanding of the heritage of the area. So in this case, this barn is considered an NDHA because a lot of the existing built form is still intact, very little change has been made, and we can easily read the heritage value of the building.
Thank you. On the drawing, it said CPD on one of the drawings. What does that mean? Does that mean covered?
I think in this instance covered. Let me just go back.
Because there was a couple of 3 locations on that particular sketch. The very first one, I think it was. Site plan, not a... That's the one. Go forward, please. All right, it is covered, okay.
Yes, it's covered, yes.
So the existing property has no bedroom?
So the existing property has 1 bedroom on the ground floor and 1 mezzanine level. So this is after the conversion is taken, after the application that we're looking at today has taken place.
Okay, thank you.
So they've removed the bedroom from the ground floor of the existing.
Any other questions for the planning officer? Okay, we have 1 registered speaker and 2 statements to be read out. The registered speaker is Mr. Mike Down, who, looking at the application, I think might be the applicant. Thank you. Well, you have 3 minutes to address the committee, and there's a button on the right-hand side of that unit. When you press that, off you go.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Mike, and alongside my wife, we live with our 2 young children at Way Barn, a building we love deeply and have poured our lives into. I'm not here today as a developer or an investor, just someone trying to stay in the family home we worked so hard to build. This application is not about allowing our home to grow modestly with us, so we can continue living and working in the rural community we're so proud to be part of. Myself, a plumbing and heating engineer, and my wife, a high-level teaching assistant at our local primary school. After 2 earlier pre-application proposals were met with objections, we completely redesigned the scheme, changing the location, layout, scale, and materials. We used the council's own barn guide given to us by the officer, which states that it is a best practice guide, describing how important these buildings are and how their character and interest can be successfully conserved. We believe we followed its spirit fully. Within this guide, it talks about how extensions can be approached sensitively, yet the feedback we received suggested they're not supported at all. Our proposed extension is modest in size, clearly subordinate, and uses traditional rural materials. It retains all the barn's historic features and reads as a latter, respectful addition in keeping with the surroundings. What's been really difficult is that despite this complete redesign, the scheme is being judged as if nothing has changed. We've asked for clarity, but the objections from the pre-application refer us back to advice for earlier unrelated versions. It has also been upsetting to suddenly see the barn referred to as a non-designated heritage asset, something that's never been mentioned in any of our previous applications. That being said, this proposal has not received any objections from the heritage officer. All we're trying to do is create enough space to stay in our home, not change its character, but preserve it through continued use. This barn means everything to us. The thought of having to uproot our family over something so modest is heartbreaking. We just want the chance to stay, to grow with a home we've put everything into. This isn't about development, it's about our lives, our home and our future. Not everyone is willing to take on a building like this. They come with challenges, but we saw its beauty and chose to protect it. We've taken that responsibility seriously for ourselves and for future generations. I ask you to consider our application on its own merits, and as this has been the case throughout the process, we are more than happy to make changes to our proposal to allow us to stay in our home. We request this is looked at, and not as a policy exercise, but as a real-life proposal from people who care deeply about this building and this place. Thank you ever so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sticking to your time limit. Questions for Mr. Down? Mr. Down? From the committee? No? Okay, thanks very much. We now have a statement which we read out by Mrs. Hoare on behalf of Broadwood Kelly Parish Council.
Thank you for reading this statement. The Broadwood Kelly Parish Council would like it known that we forwarded a request to Councillor Casbolt to call this item to the Planning Committee. This is said on the basis that the Parish Council have no issues with the development proposed and does not want to see a refusal issued for this development. We are of the view that the proposal will not result in harm to the character of the area or to the parent building, Way Barn. The treatments are sympathetic where the scale of the additions have been justified to accord with planning policy, i.e. the applicant now has 2 young children in an otherwise cramped barn conversion. To provide necessary living accommodation, significant work by the applicants and their agent have been carried out via pre-applications and advice from officers sought. The applicant was of the view that the current proposal had satisfied previous concerns. We fail to see how the proposed modest extension that will ultimately facilitate an additional bedroom and living space will demonstratively affect the non-designated heritage asset. We have sought advice from a heritage specialist consultant who confirmed that if the applicant had not secured planning permission in the first instance for the conversion, the barn would have been lost to weathering and general deterioration, particularly as it had become surplus to the owner's requirement, brackets, applicant's father-in-law, close brackets. The heritage consultant considered the horse had already bolted and the character and appearance of the original barn has already changed and now represents domestic development, i.e. with modern windows, render and cream-coloured paint finish, and all within a curtilage with domestic paraphernalia. None of these domesticated features previously existed, given it was an agricultural building. The applicant needs to be commended given they have rescued this former barn from dereliction, decay and demolition. We ask members to be mindful in deciding this case that the fact that we are living in a period where there is a housing crisis and this development will enable 2 local people, 5th generation family, that are employed in the area to remain here and close to their family, where a 2-way support network caring for varying generations prevails. It should be noted that there are no other family-sized properties in the area that this young couple with 2 young children can afford. The modest extension, if approved, will facilitate a family home to meet their needs. We consider that this benefit outweighs any perceived harm in respect of the non-heritage designated asset. You will note that the proposal has not raised any objections locally. In fact, there are 7 letters of positive representation. Finally, we can advise that a sensitive approach to the development process has been undertaken by the applicant, i.e. citing design, scale, form and mass, and we contend that the policy reference from the JLP and the NPPF 2024 have been adhered to. We ask that you support this policy compliant development.
Thank you very much. Well done for keeping to your time. Just one, we can't ask you questions about that because you're just reading out the statement, but for the planning officer, were any comments along those lines received from the parish council during the application running its course?
No, we didn't receive a comment during the life of the application from the parish.
Thank you. We now have a final statement, again read out by Mrs. Hoare, from Councillor Casebolt.
Good morning, committee. I apologise that I'm unable to attend it in person, but I'm currently working away in North Somerset and Bath. You will see from the officer's report the reasons that I have brought this application to committee. It is my belief and understanding that the application is policy compliant. The original building, salvaged from what would have become degraded and derelict over time, has been sympathetically converted to a residential property and still harks back to the original design. The proposed extension of the building has also been sympathetically done, even to the extent of having the buttress added to the new build. The site has already been converted to residential use for this young family, with one of the applicants coming from 5th generation farming family. The property is a domestic curtilage, and to keep saying that the extension would detract from the integrity of its built form, I feel that, and to coin an expression, the horse has already bolted. I certainly feel that whilst there are guidelines to planning, it is not always black and white, and we should not always treat them that way. We should be putting our arm around the shoulders of young people and congratulating them for reusing old buildings for residential, and should support young growing families to adopt their houses to suit their needs. Don't get me wrong, history is one thing, but we have to allow people to move forward. I would therefore respectfully ask that the committee approve this application.
Thank you. Again, we can't ask questions about a written statement. So we've had all the questions, and we're now in debate. Any? One from Mr. Houselander before we go into debate.
Thank you, members. I just wanted to clarify for you the non-designated heritage asset process, because I think whilst you know, it's a word mentioned and it's a locally described concept, there is actually a process that has to be gone through in our supplementary planning document, and that was gone through in order to decide in this case that it is a non-designated, the original barn conversion is a non-designated heritage asset. And I would also remind members that you are required to consider applications in accordance with the development plan. And I completely understand the emotional issues with regard to it, but your role in this is to consider it in accordance with the planning policies that we have adopted, you have adopted actually, in our joint local plan. So just as a reminder, thank you.
Yes, I mean, another way of putting that is planning is about the valid use of the land, not about necessarily the applicants that may or may not eventually live there. Right, any other points of debate before we go to a vote? Okay, the recommendation is for refusal. Can I have a seconder for that proposal? Thank you, Councillor Mott. So, again, to be clear, we are voting on the recommendation, which is refusal. So those in favour of refusal, please show. Those against? So the application is refused. Okay, we now move on to item 8 on the agenda, which is appeals update.
Members, there are a number of appeals to go through today. The first one was a Class Q conversion proposal which was refused and the inspector subsequently dismissed. Just move the slides on. So it was cited Moorside Farm. You can see where the red line is. And the barn is clearly this one here. That was the proposed conversion, which actually, from a design perspective, is probably quite reasonable as opposed to some of the Class Q conversions we see. The issue with this one though was that it was actually located really close to a scheduled ancient monument, and so that was the reason for refusal, because of the impact of conversion in that location with the scheduled monument. It's an interesting read, actually. So if you've not read it, I would recommend you read it, because there's lots of quite good commentary on the importance of scheduled monuments and the impact that development can have on the setting of those monuments. So the inspector agreed with us, but I think, you know, if you wanted to have a read, I think it's an interesting one for you to have a look at. So the next one is, again, also dismissed. It was a householder application at the Crest, Portgate, Lew Down. So it was refused. It was an application to add a two-storey extension. And these are the plans that were included with the application. The red being the new proposed extension. The reasons for refusal were based around the fact that it was incongruous in terms of scale. It increased the size of the dwelling by more than 50%. The design, the result, because of the existing ridge height, they had to reduce the pitch, which again has an impact on the look of the building overall. There was also concern that the original building was, again, a non-designated heritage asset, and that there would be problems with overlooking because of the extension on the adjoining neighbour. The inspector agreed with the council. With regard to the non-designated heritage asset, he felt it was, but it was of modest relevance to the decision, rather than a higher balance. But he also agreed with us that he thought the proposed extension was disproportionate and exceeding the 50% that the policy allows for, and the roof pitch did impact. He also indicated and agreed with us that because the property was at a slightly higher elevation than the neighbouring property, there would be an impact on the neighbouring property from a perspective of loss of privacy. The next appeal was allowed. Obviously, we'd recommended refusal on, this was again as a Class Q, and it's something that comes up quite a lot, and I think we need to be aware of this, that the extent of building operations required, so the Class Q permitted development allows a certain amount of building or operational building works to take place, and the extent of that is sometimes something which is quite tricky to discern in some ways. For a planning officer, you know, in this case there was an open-sided element, I don't know if I've got the barns, which was going to be filled in, and the officer felt that this was not appropriate. However, the inspector felt that the works were within what would be the permitted development rights, and therefore he or she, on that basis, allowed the appeal. There was another reason for refusal on this one with regard to ecology, and that they hadn't submitted an appropriate ecology statement, which and I'm surprised at the inspector on this basis, but they said that it could be dealt with by condition. But clearly, if bats were in the building, then they would potentially, well, they would be impacted by the conversion, but it was allowed. That's the proposal that was allowed. That's for 4 units as opposed to 1. This other one is another, and the reason I've sort of drawn your attention to this is another one where it was a Class Q conversion, and again it was refused on the basis of the operational works. As you can see, one side of the barn is completely open, whereas the other sides are not. And in this case, the sorry. Notes, apologies. Yes, in this case, the inspector, again, didn't agree. It was the same inspector, actually, which was interesting. Didn't agree that the structural works were over and above what the permitted development rights would allow for. And also, it appears that we made the decision outside of the 56 days. We have 56 days to make a decision on, and it was issued 2 days outside of it. So, unfortunately, it would have been a deemed consent anyway. This is an application for 2 dwellings to the rear of Abbey Spring in Tavistock. It was refused on the basis that, I'll just show you the layout. Yeah, so that was the layout proposed. So it was refused on the basis of design and materials, overdevelopment of the site, proximity to each other, and also proximity to neighbouring properties, proximity to the cypress trees, and the impact that would have, because they would have to be felled, the impact that would have on the sort of sylvan nature of the area. And there was no universal undertaking to deal with the Tamar Estuary marine site. So that was what it was refused on. In terms of appeal, the inspector dealt with loss of privacy first of all and felt that it was that there was an issue, both an interrelationship with the 2 properties, because one, you can't see it on here, but there's a gradient on the land, and one was much higher. So plot 2 was higher than plot 1, and there was a concern that plot 1 had a very small amenity area, and that amenity area would be overlooked by plot 2. And he did also find that the living conditions would be impacted of plot 1 from plot 2. Machine has just started to restart. Apologies, it's still up there though. Maybe it'll stay up there. But anyway, in relation to this, the other issues were the impact on the sylvan setting, and that was agreed by the inspector. He felt that the 2 trees immediately adjacent to plot 2 would probably need to be felled, and if they weren't felled, there would be risk of them seeking to be felled or pruned at a future date. So that the trees had to be retained. Replacements could be secured. It does allow for that, but it didn't feel that there was sufficient space on plot 1 to even put any new trees, and it wasn't proposed either. And it was a good appeal decision on the basis that it did talk about the tilted balance and the fact that we don't have a 5-year supply. So again, it would be useful. It's because my computer's just sorry, but anyway, I think it's really helpful decision to read in relation to the tilted balance, because we haven't had many examples of that currently, and it does show that the tilted balance, in this case, didn't, the balance, if you like, it was 2 extra dwellings, but the harms in terms of trees, impact on privacy overrode the fact that it was providing 2 houses. So, interesting one to read again, and that's it. Thank you.
Okay, I just got one question on appeals generally. I just get the impression, as I see the sort of appeal decisions coming into my email inbox, that more and more of them are getting approved by going against our recommendations. And whether that's just a sort of blip or whether it's not an analytical process I've gone through. I just wonder if somewhere we keep a sort of graph, if that's the right word, of how we're doing on the appeals front and whether, in fact, there is a trend, maybe as a result of the rewritten MPPF and other factors, or whether, as I say, it's just a sort of figment of my imagination and nothing strange is going on. Councillor Mott, you itching to say something?
I am. I think I would be more concerned about the lack of consistency between the planning inspectorate, because they don't seem to have any consistency at all. You'll have them where they speak about why they recognise the decision reached by a colleague on a previous appeal. They then go against that and give no justification. So whereas we have everybody yelling at us to be consistent, where we do try our utmost to be consistent and follow policy, it would be nice to see the planning inspectorate consider the same attitude and have consistency themselves.
Fair point.
Thank you, yes, and I think that relates to another appeal that I haven't managed to get to yet because my computer is doing whatever it's doing. There was an appeal at East Bowland. I don't know if members might be aware of East Bowland Farm. It's had a lengthy history and enforcement and then planning applications and what have you. And there was an application in 2024 for a sand school and stables, and that was refused by yourselves and then went to appeal and was dismissed at appeal. They then came back in with an application just for the stables, so not the sand school. And the inspector allowed the appeal for the stables. And it was interesting because he, or she, I think it was a she, they referred back to the 2024 decision that the inspector had made, but equally ignored it, almost. So they referred back to the fact that the sand school was a key concern at the time, and that this application didn't, was much reduced. However, there were objections to it from our side on the basis that it was still another incursion into the countryside, and that the inspector didn't agree. This inspector didn't agree, and that's a clear example of one inspector having a very different view to another one.
Yeah, I think the genesis of my question, I'll come to you in a second, was whether the revised MPPF is beginning to alter the balance, I suppose, in favour of development. We adhere to our policies in the joint local plan. I'm convinced we do, and we take those decisions seriously and well. But the MPPF has changed, whether we like it or not, and I'm just wondering whether the appeals process is one way of showing us that it has, in the fact that inspectors are more likely to grant things now than they might have been under the previous MPPF. I don't know whether that's the case or not, but I just wondered.
So there have been a few recent examples of appeals being allowed, 3 or 4 in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I think. Yeah. My proposal is actually to sit down with the officers and both myself and Pat Weimer from South Hams to discuss what the implications of that are, because is it that the tilted balance is being interpreted at the planning inspector level slightly different to the way we interpret it at our level. So it's something that we are going to be looking into. Yeah.
Yes, I mean I just wonder whether it's happenstance or whether it's actually something, in a sense, policy driven from the inspectorate. But I welcome the fact that you're going to sit down and give it a good going over. Right, okay. Councillor Moody.
I would really look forward to seeing any analytical data of how our appeals are going. I'd like to see a graph. I'd like to see numbers, percentages, and all the rest of it, like KPIs. That would be really, really helpful. And I think that after you've had those discussions with Pat Weimer, it would be helpful to categorise the reasons for overturning. And if there is any, as you were saying, is it because of the new NPPF? But are there particular applications that are being overturned rather than others? So which categories? And it'd be nice to know, you know, if we've got 10 in that category and 1 in that category, we know the spread. But that would be really
maybe
helpful.
we can look forward to that, some statement from you after you've had your session. Yeah. I mean, my hunch, as it were, is that given the government's drive for housing, you might expect the inspectorate to be more sympathetic to appeals on housing than they might otherwise have been previously. But I mean, we don't know.
My other point to the Borough Solicitor is that in case law changes, doesn't it, based on different interpretations from each, it's possible to change a ruling by a following case?
I mean, yes, generally. I mean, particularly, I mean, the interpretation of particular words in the NPPF. I mean, the case in point being isolated, that was subject to a number of court decisions which clarified what it actually meant, and therefore, so yes, there could be certain changes. There could be changes along those lines. I'm not aware of a tremendous number of changes of cases that have resulted in that sort of change, but yes, there will be decisions that will influence how planning inspectors approach an appeal.
I was mainly thank you for that, but I was mainly talking about just in general law, that, you know, a judge's decision can be modified by another judge later on. Is that my understanding correct? And what I'm trying to suggest is it happens in common law, and planning's no different.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, for the reasons of consistency, and consistency is an important principle in planning law, the courts have tended to suggest that planning inspectors should take that they've said planning decisions, previous planning appeal decisions are a material consideration, and that inspectors should provide reasons why they disagree with a previous decision. So it should become obvious as to why they've disagreed. We shouldn't be scratching our head and thinking, well, they've ignored it.
Okay, but you can never forecast what an inspector's going to do. That's rule 1. We move on to the final item on our agenda item 9, which is undetermined major applications. And I'm glad to report I can see that the planning officer's screen has reappeared.
It has, thank you. I don't want to go through every single application on the list because we don't normally do that, but I just wanted to let you know for your information that I'm hoping to get the wall grading centre applications on the next planning committee, which I think is on the 29th of July. And also indicate that the Rhondda and Guns yard, so the 411321 OPA, that the section 106 on that is progressing now. It had stalled, but it is progressing. So at the moment, it's not my intention to bring it back to committee, but we'll wait and see, I guess, how quickly that progresses. Also to say that application 010722 OPA, which is the land north of Green Hill, Lamerton, that has actually been issued now, so it shouldn't be on this list. And I think that's the only updates.
Okay, I just got a couple of questions.
Oh, sorry.
That's right, Chairman. I have a further update which has occurred whilst we have been sat here, which is hence the application to vary the Section 106 agreement at the land east of Oakhampton has landed at Follerton House and therefore hopefully will be sealed this week.
Well, 3 cheers for that. My question was on simply on the red statement on the first and second one. It says the applicant has stated they will not carry out any further work. What exactly does that mean?
It actually means that they're not going to submit any more information. Thank goodness. So that this is their final submission, if you like.
Okay.
And they want a decision.
Okay, that's fine. And the only other comment I had was where, despite the good news that we've just had, we are building up a sort of stock or stack of 106 agreements pending. Looking at the red comments, there seems to be quite a lot that says, you know, pending the we had a discussion at the last meeting, I think, about trying to round up some of these 106 agreements. I just wondered if there'd been any progress on that.
Yes, Chairman, I certainly know that my team have put together a list of Section 106 agreements that we believe we have. And I know that we're talking with planning colleagues to understand what their list might look like, and hopefully the two lists will marry together. And we're looking at improving the way we communicate so that planning officers have more up-to-date information about where matters stand. There are delays, I appreciate, and they occur for a number of reasons, and they're not all to do with council officers, I'm afraid.
I think it would be helpful, though, rather than just say awaiting the 106, is a little commentary on whether we're waiting for someone else to do something or someone else is waiting for us to do something. Okay, with that, I draw a close to the planning meeting. Stop the live streaming.